I'm Doug Boynton, and you're listening to WHRO's Weekly Edition, our weekly highlight of the news and stories happening in our region. As we take a look at this week's program, you'd better be careful about where you park your car because it might get even more expensive to recover a towed vehicle in Norfolk. President Biden visited Angola last week, and with him was a Hampton Roads resident who traced their lineage to the first African people trafficked to North America in 1619. WHRO spoke with them about their visit to Angola.
To be present would be a part of the human story of a horrific narrative and history that both countries share.
It's WHRO's Weekly Edition. Starting things off, a South Carolina shipyard is changing hands to HII. WHRO military reporter Steve Walsh says the deal is designed to increase submarine production for the Navy and tells us more.
Huntington Ingalls Industry announced Wednesday that they are acquiring the assets of W International in South Carolina. The company is currently building modules used in Virginia-class submarines for their competitor, Electric Boat. Jennifer Boykin, the outgoing executive vice president of HII in Newport News, says the move is designed to increase production.
It represents an opportunity to increase our capacity overall. So it will not affect the workforce here at Newport News. In fact, we expect both sites to continue to grow.
W International adds 500 employees and 480,000 square feet of manufacturing space. The deal comes as the industry struggles to meet the Navy's production goals for building 2 submarines a year. Steve Walsh, WHRO News.
Leaders from around the Chesapeake Bay watershed gathered in Annapolis Tuesday to reaffirm their commitment to cleaning up the bay. As WHRO's Catherine Hafner reports, they want to chart a new path forward.
The massive effort to restore and protect the Chesapeake Bay is at a turning point. A 2014 agreement between state and federal leaders set goals to meet by next year, but they are not on track. At the same time, climate change is making it all more difficult to achieve. Governor Glenn Youngkin spoke at this week's meeting of the Chesapeake Executive Council.
I have repeatedly urged us to address the needs of the Chesapeake Bay with great practicality and urgency. I've asked us to pursue measures over models. I've asked us to set goals that are achievable.
Youngkin and others on the council issued a directive to revise the decade-old agreement. They will refresh the partnership's goals to better incorporate evolving science, community engagement, and measurable targets. Catherine Hafner, WHRO News.
Many of us have been on the receiving end of a tow truck. Well, it may soon be even more expensive to get your car back after it gets towed in Norfolk. WHRO's Ryan Murphy has the details.
Norfolk's City Council will consider increasing towing fees at its upcoming meeting. City staff recommended rate hikes for all classes of vehicles. The vast majority of cars and trucks on the road would be considered light vehicles and would pay $200 per tow under the new rules. That's $45 more than the current rate. Medium vehicles, like large pickup trucks, would pay $350 for a tow, double the current fee. And heavy vehicles above 18,000 pounds would pay $575, about a 64% increase. Ryan Murphy, WHRO News.
As President Biden traveled to Angola last week, his delegation invited Hampton Roads resident Wanda Tucker to join them on the trip. Tucker and her family trace their lineage to the first African people trafficked to English North America in 1619 and have committed themselves to sharing that story. WHRO's Nick McNamara spoke with Tucker about the trip, one of multiple she's made to her family's ancestral home.
How did this trip all come together?
Well, I understand that there were a lot of people working behind the scenes to have me in Angola while President Biden was there. I received a call from the U.S. Embassy in Angola asking if we would be willing to be there. And then I got an email from the White House to join the Biden delegation.
Were you on Air Force One?
No, I wasn't on Air Force One, but a separate plane with the Biden delegation.
What did that mean to you personally to be invited?
I felt that the president was interested in knowing my family's story and history, and wanted my family to be there while he made the announcements based on our relationship with Angola and our many trips back. And also because we met President Lourenço for the first time in 2021 at the National Museum of African American History and Culture. And then President Lourenço invited us to Angola in 2021, and we did. And subsequently after that, my family and I, we've had meetings with President Lourenço, and we have a tour, the Heritage Tour, Family Heritage Tour, that we go back to Angola once, sometimes twice a year. For Biden to know all of this and want our family as Angolan descendants from the first Angolans trafficked there and a descendant of the first African child born in America to be present would be a part of the human story of a horrific narrative and history that both countries share, as well as the sharing this people, Angolan people, and the many descendants of African descent who are Angolan in America, so African Americans as well as Angolan Americans, and to have us present as a representative of that shared history and shared people.
What were the emotions like for you during the trip?
Overwhelmed all the time. So even though I'm comfortable in Angola, the significance of this trip was very overwhelming, but positive, but very much overwhelming. I did not know I would have a personal moment with President Biden. I did not know he was going to speak to me personally. So emotional about the work of my family, and I can't remember the words that he said to me, but I can, I know how he made me feel as he talked to me, and he valued the story of my ancestors, and he understood why the partnership with Angola was so important and necessary. And he said it was about time. But to kiss me on the forehead and for our foreheads to touch while we talked, or mostly while he talked to me, it was so powerful. He knew. It was like he knew the story. He understood the story. And while telling the story, it's so important.
What did you think of the president's speech in Angola?
It's to acknowledge publicly the atrocities. It was no longer a story that was held, some aspects of it was heard and not heard, and confusing anything about the story or reinterpreting the story. For President Biden to acknowledge the atrocities of the slave trade as a president of the United States on the soil of Angola, where those atrocities began, for me was powerful. And I felt that it meant a lot to the Angolans, the African Americans, as well as Americans. The world now knows, these are the words of the President of the United States, the world now knows this history.
What do you think this moment means for the future of the Angola-Hampton and Angola-American relationship?
Well, in September, there was a partnership formed with the sister cities between the city of Hampton and the province of Melange, where my family, we trace our lineage. So that work has already begun at both of those local levels. And then I just see the opportunities with the Libido corridor to provide jobs, employment, and that would, of course, increase education and healthcare opportunities for my Angolan family.
That was WHRO's Nick McNamara talking with Wanda Tucker of Hampton about her trip to Angola with the Biden delegation. Still ahead on Weekly Edition, the USS Arkansas plans to honor the legacy of the Little Rock Nine, the black students who integrated Little Rock Central High School in 1957. But first, a Virginia Legislative Commission finally unveiled the cause for an unprecedented surge in energy demand: data centers. WHRO's Catherine Hafner has more from this week's long-awaited report.
Data centers warehouse thousands of computer servers that process everything you do on the internet. Virginia is a global hub for the industry. The Joint Legislative Audit and Review Commission has been studying how that impacts the state. Mark Gribben with the commission says these centers need massive amounts of energy to operate and cool computers.
And building enough new infrastructure to address demand will be difficult.
With the growth that's currently projected, Gribben says Virginia would need to double the rate it's building solar farms and build a large new natural gas plant every 1.5 years. The commission recommends lawmakers take action. That could mean requiring data center companies that take tax incentives to use energy more efficiently and reduce the impacts of noise on surrounding communities. Katherine Hafner, WHRO News.
Suffolk expects renovations on its first homeless shelter to finish by the early summer of 2025. WHRO's Nick McNamara reports.
Suffolk Director of Capital Programs and Building, Gary Jones, says the finished shelter will contain 15 double-occupancy rooms, half of which will be fully ADA accessible.
We are planning to turn this thing into a nice little jewel here.
Suffolk City Council approved the project in late 2023 to turn the old Regal Inn Hotel into a shelter. Renovation work began this September. Deputy City Manager Aziz Felder says the city is contracting with Carson Dean Consulting to help with support services. The contractor has 25 years of experience in the field, including leading the 2 largest emergency shelters in North Carolina. Nick McNamara, WHRO News.
The submarine USS Arkansas will honor the legacy of the Little Rock Nine, the 9 high school students who integrated Little Rock Central High in 1957. WHRO military reporter Steve Walsh reports on the ship's milestone at Newport News Shipbuilding.
Members of the Little Rock Nine were on hand for the events leading up to the Arkansas's christening Saturday. The group of black students made history in 1957 when they desegregated the all-white Central High School in Little Rock. Carlotta Wells McNear says it wasn't an honor they were expecting.
I was rather impressed when I got this phone call, and it was funny, too, to me, that someone would call and ask us to be sponsors of a submarine.
President Eisenhower ordered the 101st Airborne Division to protect the young students after a federal judge ordered that they be allowed to attend class. In 2018, then Secretary of the Navy Ray Mabus named the 6 surviving women as sponsors of the boat. The latest Virginia-class submarine is scheduled to be finished in 2026. Steve Walsh, WHRO News.
Indigenous communities throughout the country are reclaiming their languages. Here in Virginia, 8 tribes are fostering the use of their Powhatan Algonquin language in a cultural renaissance. Pamela D'Angelo with WVTF saw the education effort in action at the Rappahannock Indian Tribe powwow this fall.
Corn, Pokotawe, Pokotawe.
Among the stalls of indigenous artwork and a storytelling booth, Kayla Locklear and her 7-year-old daughter, Hannah, sit under a canopy at a table with boxes of crayons and a stack of illustrations for kids to take in color. There's an ear of corn, a cucumber, a stream, and a bird, but there's something under the illustrations that catch the eye and your phone.
QR codes so that they can listen to the words in our Powhatan Algonquian language.
Bird.
Jeep, cha, heap, cheap.
And while parents struggle to get kids off their phones and into tribal activities, the QR codes are a way to redirect kids to learn about their cultures and their language.
And so that's the good thing about it. The parents can get involved, so they take these sheets with them, and then they can listen to it and practice and get more familiar.
Locklear is a citizen of the Chickahominy Indian tribe and their language program manager. Her tribe is part of a group of 8 state and federally recognized tribes in Virginia, slowly recovering the Algonquian language their ancestors once spoke. The program has an Algonquian name.
Omisen, which means the awakening. One of the things that we really try to get across to our communities is that our language is not dead, but it's just sleeping, and we are awakening it.
How was the language lost?
As some of our community members from Nansemond said, we are where the boat landed. So our tribes took a direct hit for Indian country, really. To survive, we assimilated. So one of those things was learning English and a loss of a lot of our language. That was part of the fight.
Hearing their language spoken again can be difficult on tribal elders who grew up during the 43 years of the 1924 Racial Integrity Act. That law made it illegal to be Indian in Virginia.
My grandmother, for example, reliving those traumas that she faced as American Indian in her time, and just to hear those words in our language that triggers those things. And it makes you think about all those times when being American Indian wasn't enough, or it wasn't valid, or you weren't real.
The tribes work with linguists to build on the words they know. Algonquian is an oral language that was translated into writing by colonists, and that's part of the tribe's next hurdle.
How will we use English letters to spell these words? Because there's a lot of words that English just doesn't have those letters. For example, we say Wingapo, which means hello. Some of our communities say Wincapo, so they say it with a K. But as our linguists have told us, our Algonquian language has a sound between a G and a K, but there's no English letter for that. So they're both correct. We could say either way.
Locklear calls it a healing journey.
We're finding out so much about our people and our ancestors through this process. It gives us this new sense of pride, like, wow, we really did these things. Or like, we're so proud of our people and what they accomplished and what they've been through and how they were still able to persevere.
From Indian Neck at the Rappahannock Tribal Center, I'm Pamela D'Angelo.
As the holiday season continues to ramp up, the Virginia Stage Company has high hopes you're in the holiday spirit this year. They're showing A Merry Little Christmas and its sequel, A Sherlock Carol, through most of December at the Wells Theater in Norfolk. Kate Nowak reports for WHRO.
Playwright Mark Shanahan tailored some details of the production to Hampton Roads, including mentions of the supposed ghosts at the Wells Theater and a rarely included scene from the original A Christmas Carol by Charles Dickens about sailors at sea on Christmas Day. Other elements are the same. Here's Shanahan after seeing a local student matinee of A Merry Little Christmas.
It's a cautionary tale for an adult who comes and thinks, have I gotten a little Scrooge-ish this year? Did the things that happened to me this year make me hard-hearted? Can I open back up and try and use my time wisely?
While the plays can be enjoyed independently, audience members may notice a variety of shared references between the two. They may even see parallels between each play's iconic main characters, Ebenezer Scrooge and Sherlock Holmes. Kate Nowak, WHRO News.
Virginia Beach Emergency Medical Services make about 40,000 ambulance trips per year, but it doesn't charge patients for them. That's likely to change in 2025. WHRO's Sienna Morales has more from Tuesday night's City Council meeting.
Virginia Beach City Council voted to make administrative preparations for an EMS compassionate billing program. Chief Jason Stroud says his department faces tough financial challenges.
Rescue Squad expenses have increased more than 40% in the last 3 to 4 years, and volunteer fundraising efforts have not increased proportionally.
A study projected billing could net the city $14.5 million next year, more than half of EMS's current budget. Compassionate billing means no one will be denied care based on their ability to pay. The city could decide to waive co-pays for residents and not to send bills to collections. The city will formally adopt the program when they vote on the budget in the spring. Sienna Morales, WHRO News.
This is WHRO's Weekly Edition. Remember, for any stories you've missed, you can visit us on the WHRO smartphone app or all social media platforms.
Some LGBTQ military veterans for President-elect Trump will roll back their hard-fought right to serve their country. Many of them served secretly at a time when they could have been kicked out of the military because of their sexual orientation. Andrew Dyer reports for the American Homefront Project.
At the LGBT Center in San Diego, 7 veterans are being added to the Wall of Honor, which recognizes the contributions of LGBTQ veterans in the community.
I thought it was a little strange at first because I really didn't think I really did anything to deserve it.
Robert Granite was drafted into the Army Reserves in 1969.
I went through a BA, 2 master's degrees, a PhD, hoping to keep out from going to Vietnam, still got drafted.
Although Granite tried to avoid the draft, he still ended up choosing to serve.
It was either that or check off that little square that I was a homosexual. And in those days, if you were going into business, one did not do that. I mean, I would not have a career.
Granite served 4 years in the reserves, being careful to hide his sexual orientation. He says it was like having a sword of Damocles over his head because at the time, being gay in the military could mean jail. Serving in such a discriminatory environment was a challenge Pele Crone says she was up for when she joined the Army in 1978. She was one of the first women in an integrated platoon at boot camp, and she refused to stay in the closet.
I'm just me, and I don't care who likes me, or even if it means prison, even if it means my life. I'm not ashamed of who I am, and I just refuse to be quiet about it.
Crone says she was lucky her commanding officer supported her, but she says she still left the Army after she was repeatedly sexually harassed by male soldiers.
Being gay and being out wasn't the issue, it was more just being a woman. I would have been a lifer, I would have retired, but because of all the harassment, it was really horrific.
Some things have changed in the military since then. Don't Ask, Don't Tell took effect in 1994 and allowed LGBTQ troops to serve if they stayed closeted. Then, in 2011, they could finally serve openly. The Pentagon now has policies against discrimination and sexual harassment. But some here are worried about the future after Donald Trump was reelected.
There were going to be tough days ahead, and there are going to be people that we love and people that we know who are going to be hurt by what happens.
Democratic member of Congress Sarah Jacobs spoke to the group about what may be ahead. President-elect Trump has complained that the military is too woke. His nominee for Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth has spoken against transgender troops and DEI. Hegseth himself has been accused of sexual assault. Jacobs promised to protect the end of Don't Ask, Don't Tell, the end of the trans ban, and says it's important
that we protect every service member who wants to serve our country as their most authentic self.
In one of its final acts, the Biden administration in October proactively upgraded the discharges of veterans forced out under Don't Ask, Don't Tell. Other LGBTQ troops who were kicked out before 1994 still have to petition individually for discharge upgrades. That's what Marine veteran Randy Hedgecock successfully did last year. She was discharged after a year and a half due to what the Marines said was sexual perversion. Speaking from the lectern, she said the center's recognition restores honor, dignity, and respect to LGBTQ service members.
We found it necessary to hide ourselves. Leave no man behind. We were not only left behind, we were tossed out. Our service was not valued equal to any other military member. Left at the hands of those who hated us, it would all have been erased.
The discharge statuses of troops before 1994 are the subject of a federal lawsuit now working its way through the court. In San Diego, I'm Andrew Dyer.
You've been listening to WHRO's Weekly Edition. We had help today from WHRO's Ryan Murphy, Catherine Hafner, Nick McNamara, and Kate Nowak. Pamela D'Angelo with WVTF, and Andrew Dyer with the American Homefront Project. Thanks, as always, to Connor Worley, who produced today's program. A reminder, you can always catch full episodes on the Weekly Edition podcast feed. You can get your news updates at WHRO.org and the WHRO Reports podcast feed. One more thing, this is the week for the membership drive at WHRO and WHRV. You support the journalism at WHRO with your investment at WHRV.org. And thank you. For all of us at WHRO and WHRV, I'm Doug Boynton. Stay safe. Be well.